And joining us now is the 70th Secretary of State, Fox News contributor Mike Pompeo is with us. Mr. Secretary, the way I see it is Prime Minister Netanyahu has no option here, no choice here. This is the worst attack ever on Israeli soil. The only thing that I might be a little surprised at, I mean, the Israelis' intelligence is known as the world's gold standard. Something certainly went wrong here. I'm not sure what. It probably is not the time to talk about it. Let's get your overall view on what we're seeing. By the way, we're also seeing that there have been, minutes apart, we see Israel is firing into Gaza as the show is going on right now.
Well, Sean, thanks for having me on. This is grotesque. It is barbaric. And it requires winning. And Prime Minister Netanyahu gets that. And I am just hoping that this administration doesn't slow him down. These are going to be long weeks. There are going to be some pictures that come out of Gaza that are going to be tragic. But make no mistake about it, Prime Minister Netanyahu has the duty to defend his own people in the same way that the United States has that duty. We now have Americans held hostage. And Hamas, puppet of Iran, is threatening to kill them. They've already killed 11 Americans. They're threatening to kill Americans live on video and broadcast the audio as well. And President Biden hasn't told the Iranians, he hasn't told the world what America's response to that will be. I remember, Sean, so well, when the Iranians threatened to kill Americans on our watch, when they were launching artillery into the embassy, American embassy in Baghdad, Iraq, we made clear we would hold not the knuckleheads on the ground in Iraq, but we would hold the Iranian regime responsible. When we did that, we didn't create World War III, as they said we might. When we got out of the JCPOA, when we moved the embassy, they said we'd create World War III. No, what has created war here is American appeasement, American weakness. And if we don't stand with Israel, if we don't give them the tools that they need to prosecute this to the end, until Hamas is wiped out and the Iranian regime understands that the Israelis mean business and they have American support, then we will risk even more American lives.
Mr. Secretary, let me go over. Maybe you can explain this to me. The first Iranian deal was Barack Obama and Joe Biden. And for the life of me, I never quite understood that deal. That would allow them to continue their nuclear program and ratchet it up, as a matter of fact, every year after every year. They didn't have any, as part of that deal, no U.S. inspectors. Billions of dollars going to Iranian mullahs. They didn't have anywhere, any place, any time inspections. I don't trust the mullahs of Iran as far as I can throw them. OK, Donald Trump becomes president. That policy is stopped, thankfully. And here we are back with the $6 billion in ransom payments for 5 Americans. Now, they can argue all they want that so far not a penny of that $6 billion has gone to Iran, but the money has already been moved into Qatar, where we know it's going to end up in the Iranians' hands. And whether they say it's for humanitarian purposes or not, because the president of Iran has already said, you're not going to tell us how to spend the money, that frees up money that they would otherwise be spending on their own infrastructure, humanitarian aid, et cetera, for more terrorist attacks. They are the #1 state sponsor of terror. Tell me where this mindset comes from that you are going to do business and pay ransom to terrorists. I have a hard time understanding it.
Sean, it's completely unexplainable. It is completely illogical. It can only be that as part of the Blame America First mantra that we're sort of the problem in the world. You saw this on Harvard's campus today. Just so indecent, so grotesque to see Americans supporting Hamas that's carting kids into the Gaza Strip to kill them on live TV. The fact that the $6 billion hasn't been spent yet, well, great. Make clear it's not going to be. Pull it back. And Sean, you know this too. We had the strictest sanctions ever imposed on the Iranian regime. It worked. We put them in the box. We isolated them. It built out the Abraham Accords and peace throughout the Middle East. At least 20, maybe $30 billion of Iranian wealth as a direct result of the Biden administration just refusing to enforce the sanctions they're required to enforce. No, it was Iran that fueled this. It is Iran that is the problem. Hamas executed a mission that was funded, trained, and directed by the Iranians. I'm confident we will find that, and I'm worried. I'm worried because they're going to do the same thing in the north. The Iranians are prepared to fight to the last Hezbollah life or the last Hamas life. It is going to have to be Iran that gets cost imposed on it, or this will continue.
How would you impose those costs? Because I agree with you. Ultimately, all the proxy wars that have been fought in the region, They all seem to have their origins of monies and support coming from Iran. We now even have direct reports that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard gave the okay, offered the weapons, gave the financial support. So what price does Iran pay in all of this, and how do they pay it?
So the first step is to make sure Israel secures its own space. It's got to go take down Hamas. Every last person who's connected to this got to be wiped off. Second, the United States should demand that not only the United States, but every other country stop providing any money to Iran. They're still funding the Palestinians in Judea and Samaria. They're still underwriting all kinds of programs that go to these terrorists. We've got to stop all of that funding. It could be done tomorrow. President Biden just asked to say so. And then we need to make sure that we deny Iranians the chance to come to school in the United States. The list is long. We have done it, Sean. We know precisely how to execute this. We don't have to imagine how you build out peace and stability in the Middle East because we had done it for 4 years. The Biden administration just came in, ripped it up, turned it upside down. And the deaths that happened today are the responsibility of Hamas. They were caused by Iran. But the conditions were set by American weakness in Afghanistan, by allowing Vladimir Putin to think that a small invasion might be okay. And then ultimately, not to convince the Iranians that we would have Israel's back. When your first instinct is to say, can't we all just get along and the Israelis need to stand down? And then the Secretary of State sends out a tweet that also had to be taken down because he demanded a ceasefire. Those are the things the Iranians observe. They know that America is not serious. And I pray that President Biden understands what is at risk. It is Israel and America's place in the world, and we have to get this right.
Well, you're talking about specifically, we urge all sides to refrain from violence and retaliatory attacks. If you break it down, and look at the population of Israel versus the population of the United States, this attack would be the equivalent of, in one day, killing over 35,000 Americans. Would that be their position, to stand down and not have a retaliatory strike against the people that would kill 35,000 Americans? That's my first question. And then secondly, what part is Saudi Arabia playing here? Because they seem to condemn Israel in this, and I thought that Israel and the Saudis were on the verge of making a deal together.
So two thoughts. One, no, we should definitely not be telling Israel. No one should be telling Israel how to conduct its foreign policy. Prime Minister Netanyahu should have a free hand to do what he needs to do. I saw a statement from the General Secretary at the United Nations today that just was sickening, talking about how we need to make sure that everyone obeys international law. Goodness, when you're raping women and dragging them back to Gaza Strip, that's not international law. Second, with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, I hope that what will happen is that they will push forward, is that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will see that, in fact, that Iran is a problem, not only for Israel, but for the Emiratis, the Kuwaitis, and for them as well. They will understand that the risk of this terror regime from the Islamic Republic of Iran is a risk to them as well. And this effort to bring them in to the Abraham Accords, to create peace and to recognize Israel, will push forward. I'm counting on that happening. I hope that it will. It would make perfect sense for everyone in the region to see that happen.
Let me ask you, Mr. Secretary, Hamas terrorists, we have evidence and video footage beheading Israeli soldiers. We have Hamas executing that teenage girl hostage in front of her parents. And then you have people like Congresswoman Tlaib blasting Israel in the wake of this. How do you explain that wing of the Democratic Party that seems to be getting louder and louder and more dominant every single day?
It's unexplainable, Sean. I have no capacity to comprehend how you could watch what has taken place there and have any idea that the right answer to that is to blame the victims of this tragedy. We see reminiscences of what happened in the Holocaust, right? We see women and children being dragged off to their death. And for a congressman not to call that out, to say, no, that's the problem, and somehow say that those victims are to blame for what's happened is fundamentally indecent. And I hope the good people that she represents vote her out immediately. We have to make sure that we all understand that what is happening here is going to go on for a while. This is going to be of duration. It is going to require a lot of strength and temerity, and it is going to demand the American people join together to protect the basic human dignity that America has stood for 250 plus years.
Mr. Secretary, I shudder to think of a day when the Iranian mullahs, with their radicalism, married to nuclear weapons, and they seem to be desperately trying to get them. They have now formed what I call a new axis of evil with with China and with Russia, and we could see North Korea becoming a part of it. And I shudder to really ask this question, and I think it's the hardest question. Does the world have a very limited window here to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons? And do those strikes need to happen sooner than later?
Sean, I think the window is closing. We absolutely have to get after it. We saw this in the Trump administration, and we began this process with actions that we took, including striking against their leader, Qasem Soleimani, General Soleimani, taking seriously the need to push back against Iranian leadership. I do worry about these nuclear weapons. Remember, this administration went back to a policy that gave them money and allowed them to continue to enrich uranium. We have to reverse that. They should go right back into our model of punishing Iran, imposing restrictions on Iran, and denying them the capacity to continue to develop their nuclear weapons program. We have the ability to do that, and if we can't stop them through those restrictions, then we've got to do the right thing and make sure this regime never gets even remotely close to weaponizing the uranium that they already have.
Aren't they buried deep within the ground all out throughout the territory of Iran?
Sean, they are, but make no mistake about it. If America is serious and Israel is serious and the threat is sufficient, I am very confident that we can make sure that a weapons program is stopped inside of Iran. It will take a seriousness that I have not seen, a resolve I have not seen from the Biden administration. Too much Jimmy Carter, not enough Ronald Reagan. If we get it right, I'm confident that we can prevent that from happening.
It would have to be Bibi acting alone, because he'll get no help or support at all from Joe Biden. I don't think they're capable of it. But we need the adults back in charge, that's for sure. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Thank you, sir. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.